Yeah, so we're seeing the exact same thing where we know that real-time payments is coming, but the struggle is it's a new trend for all of us. So we all know Venmo, we all know PayPal, and we think it's real-time payments, but it's not truly real-time payments. So the fact that real-time payments is coming to the US, right now it's primarily thought of as peer-to-peer. We as consumers know it, but banks really need to jump on the trend, and they see that it's going to take over the payments landscape for the foreseeable future. Now, there's a difference between seeing a trend coming and then being ready for it. So we found that a lot of the small to mid-tier banks know real-time payments is coming, but they aren't technologically set up for it yet. So they're getting into the research, they're getting into the due diligence of getting their tech stack ready for real-time payments. And that has become a bit of a problem for them because they see that it's going to be an ISO 20022 message type. A lot of these banks are dealing in an ISO 8583 message type, which can be a disconnect between the bank and the clearinghouse, whether it be TCH or FedNow in a couple of years. So while it's a trend that's coming, the small to mid-tier banks are really trying to prepare and get ready from a technology standpoint, and that's what we hope to help them with. So when we look at the banks that we talk to on a day-to-day basis and even prospects that come down the road, we have found that they have a legacy system in place. And the great thing about a legacy system is it's been up and running for years and going very well. The problem with the legacy system is it can be viewed as a monolithic code base. So it's very hard to turn the steering wheel, so to speak, to real-time payments because it's a very stagnant, it's held together by bug fixes and duct tape years over time. And what we have found is that a lot of these small to mid-tier banks are noticing that. With each and every new payment trend that comes up, they are starting to feel the burden and the problems that are tied to a legacy system and starting to make a pivot to more of a microservices-based architecture where they can take small chunks of code, start to introduce that to the legacy system, and then over time you eventually replace the monolithic code base. You get to a more nimble architecture behind the scenes in your tech stack, and that's what many of these small to mid-tier banks are preparing for, is to become that more agile, nimble solution instead of a monolithic code base that is hard to dictate and move around. So, what we have done with Euronet is we have developed our solution in a microservices-based architecture, which we feel will better prepare not only us as a solution provider, but these banks to meet the upcoming payment trends that seem to come every 6 months or so. Yeah, so what we have seen is that change is hard, no matter how big the bank is, especially for small to mid-tier banks where maybe the capital isn't there that you would run into a tier one. So the 2 to 5 year roadmap is really all hinging on that more nimble technology stack, because you need to have the ability to try something out and pivot if it doesn't work. What we call it's more of an incremental innovation strategy as opposed to a big bang, rip and replace, disruptive strategy. So through this more nimble tech stack, you are able to try something out and pivot if it doesn't work. We've seen a lot of the recent opportunities move to a cloud-based infrastructure. Certainly there are a lot of pros to that. You don't have the technology to rely on in your office, but it's in the cloud and it can be more reliable. You're able to replicate data centers easily. So we're seeing over the next 2 to 5 years a lot of the opportunities shifting to a cloud-based architecture or deployment. And we're also seeing a lot of these, let's try something out with an incremental innovation as opposed to investing a lot of capital into starting over. Yeah, so we really look at the ISO 20022 message from 2 standpoints. One is we always think about the customer first and their experience. With real-time payments, most of the networks popping up around the world, we're up to 56 networks around the world now. Most of them are on the ISO 20022 message type. And what that brings is a wealth of data that you don't get from the legacy message types that we've all been working with over the past 20, 30 years. So when we look at the customer experience, knowing where a real-time payment stands with each and every leg throughout the transaction, just the knowledge and the comfort that that brings, the security that that brings to the consumer boosts their comfort level with the transaction itself, with the trend, and adopting all of these solutions that you might tack on to the rails of a real-time payment. So we always look to the customer experience first, and that visibility that the ISO 20022 message types brings is really going to enhance everyone's experience and comfort in real-time payments. And then you get into the marketing side of things. You're going to see, is this an invoice? How much is the invoice amount for? Where is the invoice coming from? And you can start to personalize, and again, looking at the customer experience, bring an experience that feels more one-to-one instead of one-to-many. So they feel more comfortable working with you as a bank, as a solution provider, and want to use other products as well. We all want to increase our, not stickiness, but at least the customer relationship that we have with our account holders. So the ISO 20022 message type, bringing that wealth of data that we really haven't seen in previous message types, will just boost that customer experience and that relationship. Yeah, so when we look at real-time payments, it's really two components. One is the connection, the rails, and that is going to become commoditized pretty quickly. Everyone's going to connect, everyone's going to have that. Where you really start to differentiate yourself from your competition, whether it's within your region or multinational, is through the digital overlay services that you then tack on to the rails. And the early adopters are going to have first say in really defining the market. So when you look at the US, you really do need to start preparing for FedNow today. I mean, we know it's going to be out in 2023. Now is the time to get involved. Now is the time to really have an impact on what that network looks like. And also talk to your peers, maybe not direct competitors, but peers that are in the industry with you, to start to define those digital overlay services that will become prominent in the US. We've seen a handful rise to the top around the globe, things like request to pay, bill payment. We're starting to see more B2B digital overlay services come to fruition and start to take over. You know, we really all think of real-time payments as peer-to-peer. You know, you go out to eat pizza with your buddy and you want to split the check. Well, it's become so much more than that. And the business use cases are really starting to drive adoption of the networks, but also the activity within it. So as an early adopter, you really kind of push yourself to the front of the crowd and start to define those use cases and start to capture market share within your region as well. So start now.